The sound of shattering glass echoed sharply across the pristine courtyard of the Grand Royal Spa. But it was not just glass that was breaking in that moment. It was a fragile, handmade distillation tray. It was the culmination of countless hours of painstaking labor by a girl who lived entirely in the dark. The delicate equipment was now crushed brutally under the expensive leather shoe of a man who possessed too much money and far too little soul. Marcus was a flash-in-the-pan real estate tycoon, with a notorious reputation for bulldozing anyone and anything that stood in his. He sneered down at the young woman, kneeling helplessly on the cold cobblestones. With a deliberate and cruel swing of his foot, he kicked her hand-woven basket. Rare morning dew rosebuds spilled out. They scattered and sank into the muddy puddles left by the recent storm. He mocked her clouded, unseeing eyes with a vicious laugh. He called her a worthless, blind orphan who was stubbornly standing in the way of real progress. Chloe just knelt there, in silence. Her trembling fingers desperately mapped the wet ground to gather the ruined petals before they were completely destroyed. She fought back the tears because she refused to give him the satisfaction of her crying. He mocked the flawed eyes of an orphan girl, never suspecting that the fragrance from that trampled basket of flowers was the exact heritage ingredient needed to save $1 million perfume brand from the brink of bankruptcy. Subscribe to our channel today to witness how the warm miracle of a righteous fragrance can overcome the darkest storms. Chloe had been born without the gift of sight. While her eyes could not take in the colors of the world, heaven had compensated her with a genius sense of smell. Her nose could detect the faintest shift in the wind. She knew the exact moment a flower reached its peak bloom. She understood the hidden notes of nature that most people completely ignored. She lived in a small weathered cabin at the edge of an ancient sprawling hill covered in heritage tea roses. Every single drop of essential oil she distilled was born from her sweat and her tears. She did not do this to buy fancy clothes or live a life of luxury. The modest income she earned went entirely toward providing soothing aromatic therapies for children at the local orphanage. It was also the only way she could afford the expensive medical treatments for her elderly adoptive father. He was suffering from severe black lung disease after decades of working in the coal mines just to keep food on their table. He had given up his health to raise her. Now she was doing everything in her power to keep him breathing. But her peaceful, hard-working life was currently under siege. Marcus had recently bought up all the surrounding properties. He was obsessed with leveling the ancient Rose Hill to build a massive, soulless luxury resort and a private harbor. Chloe's small plot of land was the only piece of the puzzle he did not own. He sent his thugs to intimidate her. Almost daily, they would cut her fences and trample her garden and poison her water supply. He wanted to break her spirit until she had no choice but to sign the deed over to him. Yet despite the constant harassment and the heavy burden of her father's failing health, Chloe never let her heart turn bitter. She continued to wake up before dawn. She was guided only by the scent of the morning dew to harvest the flowers. If you believe in the pure fragrance of a righteous heart, please comment this prayer below. I pray to keep my soul as pure as the snow camellia blooming brightly amidst the cold mountain fog, so that God will always light my way. Miles away from this quiet mountain town, a different kind of tragedy was unfolding in the city. William was the brilliant millionaire founder of a world-renowned organic heritage perfume empire. On paper, he had everything a man could ever desire. In reality, his world was completely falling apart. His company was facing an aggressive, hostile takeover. Their latest product line had failed because they could not source the authentic, unpolluted organic ingredients they needed. But the business crisis was nothing compared to the agony in his personal life. His young daughter, Lily, had retreated entirely into herself after the sudden tragic passing of her mother. Lily suffered from severe depression and autism. For over a year, she had not spoken a single word or shown a hint of a smile. Desperate to find peace for his little girl, William took her on a quiet winter retreat to the mountains. He hoped the crisp air and the promise of seeing the northern lights would somehow break through her invisible shell. One freezing afternoon, Lily wandered away from their rented cabin. She was deeply distressed and experiencing a severe sensory overload meltdown. William searched frantically through the dense, foggy woods, with his heart pounding with absolute terror. He finally found her, near the edge of a vast, fragrant field of ancient roses. But she was not crying anymore. Lily was sitting on a wooden bench, holding a small amber glass bottle. She was looking up at a young woman with clouded eyes. It was Chloe. Chloe was softly humming a lullaby. She was gently dabbing a drop of her meticulously distilled rose water onto the little girl's wrists. The calming, pure aroma worked like an absolute miracle. For the first time in an agonizingly long year, the deep tension in Lily's small face completely vanished. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. A soft, beautiful smile spread across her lips. William froze in his tracks. Tears immediately streamed down his face as he witnessed his daughter being pulled out of the darkness. He approached the blind woman, with his voice choked with overwhelming gratitude. Chloe simply smiled warmly. She was completely unaware that she had just saved the most important thing in a billionaire's life. William quickly realized that the scent of Chloe's rosewater was exactly the lost heritage note his company had been desperately searching for. But more importantly, he saw the deep kindness and unyielding strength radiating from this blind girl. He noticed the fresh boot prints on her destroyed garden beds and the threatening letters nailed to her door. A fierce protective instinct ignited inside him. He decided right then and there not to reveal his true identity. Instead, he introduced himself simply as a traveling handyman, looking for honest work. He asked if he could stay and help tend the gardens in exchange for room and board. Chloe sensed a genuine warmth and honesty in his voice, and happily agreed. William immediately went to work. He silently reinforced the fences around the ancient rose hill. He installed hidden security cameras disguised as birdhouses to monitor the perimeter. He was methodically gathering irrefutable evidence of Marcus's relentless and illegal harassment. The pure, rustic love Chloe poured into her work had brought the light back to William's daughter. Please write down this prayer to support her. I pray to keep my soul as pure as the snow camellia blooming brightly amidst the cold mountain fog, so that God will always light my way. The tension on the mountain finally reached its boiling point. Just 3 weeks later, a loud mechanical roar shattered the peaceful morning silence. The ground actually trembled beneath Chloe's feet, as 3 massive yellow bulldozers rolled up to the edge of her ancient rose garden. Marcus stepped out of his luxury SUV, wearing a smug and victorious grin. He had grown tired of playing games, and decided to simply crush the girl's resistance by brute force. He walked up to the fragile wooden fence and kicked it down. With a loud, violent crack, he shouted for the heavy equipment operators to start the engines and flatten everything in their path. Chloe stood bravely in front of her beloved flowers, with her arms spread wide. Her whole body was shaking with fear, but she absolutely refused to step aside. Marcus walked up right to her face and laughed mercilessly at her desperate attempt to protect weeds. He told her that nobody in the world cared about a blind orphan or her silly little flowers. He sneered that money ruled the world, and she was absolutely nothing but dirt beneath his expensive shoes. He signaled the lead bulldozer to move forward and finish the job. The massive steel blade lowered to the earth and began to tear up the dirt just inches from where Chloe was standing. Suddenly, a man stepped firmly between Chloe and the roaring machine. It was the quiet handyman. He raised his hand and stared Marcus dead in the eye, with a look of absolute unyielding authority. Marcus burst out laughing at the sight of the dirt-covered gardener, trying to play the heroic savior. He mocked the man and told him to get out of the way before he got crushed along with the useless roses. But William did not move a single inch. Instead, he calmly reached into his worn jacket and pulled out a small black satellite phone. He made one incredibly short phone call. Less than 2 minutes later, the wailing sound of sirens echoed up the lonely mountain road. A massive convoy of sleek black government vehicles aggressively surrounded the construction crew. Dozens of federal agents and state conservation officials poured out of the cars. They immediately ordered the bulldozer operators to kill the engines and step down. Marcus was furious and demanded to know what on earth was going on. He started waving his property deeds around and yelling wildly about his legal rights as a developer. That was when William reached into his other pocket and pulled out a heavy document, sealed with red wax. He unfolded it carefully and held it right in front of Marcus's shocked face. William's voice was no longer the quiet and humble tone of a simple gardener. It boomed with the commanding presence of a billionaire CEO who was used to running the world. He introduced himself properly as William Sterling, the supreme chairman of the global Sterling Heritage Fragrance Empire. He announced to the silent crowd that the document was an emergency federal conservation order. It officially designated the entire ancient Tea Rose Hill as a heavily protected national ecological heritage site. Marcus's jaw dropped in absolute disbelief as the color completely drained from his sweaty face. He stammered and tried to argue that this was a mistake and that his money could make this go away. But William just looked at him with absolute disgust and was not finished with him yet. William signaled to the federal agents, who immediately stepped forward with heavy steel handcuffs. William had spent the last 3 weeks meticulously compiling every single piece of hidden camera footage from the birdhouses. He had perfectly recorded the hired thugs destroying property and poisoning the water and physically threatening a vulnerable blind woman. His corporate lawyers had also uncovered a massive trail of financial fraud. Marcus had committed to buy the surrounding land so cheaply. Marcus was completely and utterly ruined. His massive resort development permits were instantly revoked, and his company accounts were frozen on the spot. He was dragged away in handcuffs, screaming and crying, as he watched his multi-million-dollar empire crumble to dust in a matter of seconds. The arrogant tycoon who thought he could buy the world had just lost absolutely everything. He was left with nothing but the clothes on his back and a very long prison sentence waiting for him. William turned around and gently placed his warm hands on Chloe's trembling shoulders. He finally confessed his true identity to her and apologized for the deception. He told her how her pure heart and her incredible talent had not only saved his little girl, but had also provided the missing heritage ingredient. It would save his entire global company. Right there in the middle of the blooming garden, he officially appointed Chloe as the global director of fragrance safety and authentication for his empire. But the miracles from heaven did not stop there. William immediately arranged for the absolute best pulmonary specialists in the country to take over her father's medical care. The old man was quickly moved to a state-of-the-art private hospital, where he finally began to recover his strength and breathe easily again. Chloe's pure soul had finally received the most perfect and sweet blessing from heaven. Please comment below to share in her beautiful joy. I pray to keep my soul as pure as the snow camellia, blooming brightly amidst the cold mountain fog, so that God will always light my way. 6 months later, a gentle and warm spring breeze swept through the mountain valley. Chloe was sitting peacefully on the wooden bench outside her completely renovated cabin. She slowly reached up with trembling hands and carefully unwrapped the thick white bandages covering her eyes. William had flown in the top ophthalmic surgeons in the entire world to perform a groundbreaking and incredibly expensive restorative surgery. She blinked a few times against the bright morning light. For the first time in her entire life, she could actually see the vibrant pinks and deep reds of her beloved roses. She saw the bright blue sky and the golden rays of the sun filtering through the ancient branches. Tears of absolute joy and overwhelming gratitude streamed down her face. She looked down and saw little Lily holding a freshly picked pink flower. Lily looked up at her with bright, sparkling eyes and spoke her very first words in over a year. She softly called Chloe her beautiful angel. Then Chloe looked up and saw William standing right in front of her. He looked at her with a love so deep and genuine, it completely took her breath away. He slowly got down on one knee in the soft green grass. He held out a delicate diamond ring that sparkled exactly like the morning dew. He asked her to share the rest of her beautiful life with him and his daughter. The true fragrance of a righteous and honest character is an eternal treasure that heaven will always heavily protect. If you loved this miraculous story, please click the subscribe button to help us spread the warmth of love every single day.